This is a board that I'm making. It's gonna be a cutting board for my buddy Chow Dragon. It's got the whitish is maple, the brown is walnut, and then the yellowish is teak, African teak. And it's ripping a bunch of boards to cross-cutting a bunch of boards to 20 inches. And then I will joint and plane them as necessary, and then rip them down into about 1-inch strips. Glue those together, then you flip the strips up. And you glue them together, then you cross-cut again, flip the strips up, make a pattern that way. So I think the plan is to start by taking teak and the maple walnut, and cutting it down to approximately the same size as these stocks that I already have. Rollers are there. On. Do a sort of explain what's going on there real quick. Effectively, there's a drum in here that rotates with a sanding wheel on it. I'm not quite sure if the camera is going to work for this, but I'll open it up. Let's see, sandpaper there, it rotates. There's also a gripping pad here that once you put a board on it, will get pinched between the rollers on the bottom here, and then get pulled through the machine. Knob here, 1/4 turn, is 1/64 of an inch. I currently haven't calibrated this machine, I just got it. So I'm kind of just using it for rough cuts right now, but you know, theoretically 1/64 of a turn is a quarter. 1/4 of a turn is 1/64 of an inch. And then I've got a digital readout here with a little scale. So pretty simple, but you know, looks nice and smooth. There's some lines here that will need to get buffed out. That's because this tool is a 16-32, which means it's a 16-inch wide tool, but it's open-standed. So you can flip it around and do, you can do 16 inches on one side, and then you can flip it around and do 16 inches on the other side because you can have an overhang. So this is, I think I measured this last night at like 26 inches Actually, I think this dimension is 21 and this one's 26. So just a little over the 16. So I'll hit that with a hand sander later and it'll look much nicer. But for now, I believe our next step is to trim up this edge and then do some cross cuts of 1-inch panels. And then we'll flip those up and glue it together again. Now, I get to play with my other new tool, which is my brand new track saw. That's a little janky, but I'm gonna have to print some adapters so that I can plug some of these tools into the dust collection system, because dust collection system ran me a lot of money. I might as well use it. To an even width, theoretically should be able to do clean up everything with this. Part of the problem is all the little debris and stuff on my bench is getting in between the gaps here. As I, push it together, there's something in the way. If I want it to be 24, I can lose an inch on each side and then trim it down to about 23.5 as a final dimension. So what I could do right now, all of the colors are strips. And, the way I laid it out is the way I like to lay it out. If I reverse it, it's gonna look the same. Now what I could do is this. So I think that's a pretty good looking pattern. You gotta ignore the scorch marks on from the saw blade, but I really like the maple like that, almost checkerboardy. So I think we'll proceed with that. And we'll let it glue up for, the majority of the day, probably about 8 or 10 hours, then I'll check it, probably do some cleanup, and then probably let it dry overnight, but we'll see. Too much glue? Too much glue. This tool is really good for taking very wide boards like this and making them flat across the top. I've got another much cheaper tool, but it can only do 12 inches at a time. This one can do 16 inches at a time, but it's open on the end, so I can do up to 32 inches. versus what about this one? So far, I prefer the color of that one way more. Yeah, I think the second one's better. And then the third one is technically a wax to be applied afterwards, but I can see what it looks like anyways. Not a whole lot of difference between the second and the third one. Yeah, that's the way. Okay, but before we do that, I got some other steps I gotta do first. Alrighty, so that's what that guy looks like now. You can also see down here, it'll clean up nicely, but I need to sand it some more. This color versus, you know, the really pale. So, plan is, I'm not gonna cut this corner yet, but basically I'm gonna put this guy on my CNC, reference off of this corner. I'm gonna have the CNC cut a, like a drippings trench around the outside. And then once that's done, I will finish up the last 3 edges here. And then once that's done, I will sand it and oil it, and that'll be it. That tray looks really nice to me. So we'll now do some finish trim cuts on this side. We're going to sand it all down to get rid of my test finishes. And then we'll actually finish it. On the back here, oh, that's what I'm seeing. You can actually notice an interesting effect with the different porosities of different woods. Move this way so that we get a little bit more light on it. You see where the finish has pulled through the walnut, but it has not really pulled through the teak, and it definitely has not pulled through the hard maple. So, before sanding, before finishing, this is what we're looking at. Pretty happy with the result of this so far. And I hope my buddy Jordan is too. The only thing I'm still debating is I was thinking about, there's a couple of options I was thinking about for the backside. One, lead as is, which is kind of where I'm leaning right now. I like the look of this. Two, I was thinking I could carve this same tray on the backside, and you know, it could be a little bit reversible. I don't really like that. There's a very, very, very slight bow in the center that runs out to all corners. Now, if I do this, then it's concave. Sure, concave. I'm gonna stick with concave. I don't remember concave versus convex. The point is, any juices, instead of running out to the edges into the channels, would instead pool in the center. The other thing I thought about was using my CNC to carve my buddy's name in the back. Now, typically when I've done that kind of stuff, I like to do an inlay so that it's still flushier, but vary the color. I think I'm just gonna leave the back as is. We'll see once I've finished it up a little bit.